Howdy, howdy, Chris here. We're back in the garage today, and today we're going to be painting a front and rear bumper cover on a Chevy 1500 pickup truck. We're painting it this beautiful pewter color. We'll be using two different guns for this, the Instructional Drizzle D1, which is a low volume, low pressure paint gun, and we'll also be using the Iwata Kiwami 4, which I haven't used in some time, but painting these bumper covers reminded me why I love Iwata paint guns. I'll be walking you through the entire paint process step by step, from sealer to base coat to clear coat, all the instructions you need to get a job like this done. We'll be doing it with no paint booth, so let's dig in and get started. I want to quickly touch on how we prepared these bumpers for paint. These are two aftermarket bumper covers. They came pre-primed, so in order to get those prepared for paint, we needed to sand those. So we machine sanded those with 320, and then we went over all with 600. Now that removes some of that primer, which is okay. We don't necessarily need to remove all that primer, but you do want to make sure it's sanded really well. The next step was to give it a good thorough cleaning, and to do that we used isopropyl alcohol, or you can use prep solvent. And then we went ahead and sprayed an adhesion promoter over both of these bumper covers. We use upol number 4, or we use Bulldog. You can get Bulldog in a sprayable version as well. And if you're interested in any of these products, we're gonna list all these products in this video down in the description below. After applying the adhesion promoter, you wanna wait about 5 minutes, and then you can apply your sealer. Now the sealer we're using is the upol 2253V. That is a primer that works as a high build primer. It works as a primer surfacer, or you can reduce it a little bit more and use it as a sealer. That's a 3-in-1 product that works very well and is very versatile. So our sealer mixes up 4 parts primer, 1 part activator, and then 2 parts urethane reducer. Now what we're looking for here is we're looking to put it on medium wet. We want it to be smooth. The key is to apply these substrates as smooth as possible. The smoother you get your sealer, the smoother your base is going to be, which allows you to lay down a smooth clear coat as well. In order to spray your sealer smooth, you have to have the proper atomization, and that has to do with the gun setup. That's going to consist of your fan pattern, your fluid volume, your air pressure, your speed, and your distance. So the speed you're spraying and the distance you're spraying from. How I set up this Instructional Drizzle D1, this is the low volume, low pressure paint gun. It produces less overspray, consumes less air, and it'll save you in materials. For base coat and for sealer, I'm going to set it up at about 20 PSI for my air pressure. My fan pattern is going to be wide open. And then as far as the fluid volume, I like about 2.5 turns out from closed. The easy way to say this is I just close my fluid volume all the way and I turn it 2.5 turns out. If you're a beginner, these are fantastic gun settings to get you started. They're going to get you in the ballpark, get you a nice smooth finish, and you can always adjust them from there. If you're interested, I have a more detailed explanation of how to adjust your gun and get the perfect atomization. I've created a PDF file that goes through this entire process step by step in order. You can pick that up on my Shopify store at garagenoisegear.com. There's a PDF on spraying high metallic finishes, your base coat, and there's also a PDF on how to spray clear coat properly. And I go through all the gun settings and even some troubleshooting. I think it's just a fantastic resource for you to have on hand in case you have any questions and you don't want to watch another video. You can just refer to that PDF file and get your answer. So with these high metallic finishes, it's important to get that atomization. So you want to make sure you're not putting on too much material. If you're putting on too much material and you have too much volume coming out and not enough air pressure, you're going to get large droplets of paint. That's going to give you texture in your finish. The way to correct that would be dial down your fluid volume just a little bit, or maybe up your air pressure just a little bit. You can also be atomizing it too much. That would consist of just having too much air pushing that paint out and not enough paint coming out of the gun. So then you would have to adjust your fluid volume, open a little bit more, and dial your air pressure down a little bit. Now, when I'm spraying a high metallic base, I like to spray my first coat on just a little bit heavier. That's going to help with getting a nice even finish. One thing you want to avoid when spraying high metallics is over atomization. That's going to cause mottling, unevenness in your metallics, or striping, which is a tiger stripe in your metallics. When you put your first coat on, it's always going to look a little blotchy on high metallic finishes. Once it starts to flash off and starts to cure, that'll even out. As far as your spraying techniques, you want to have a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel. Even on these bumper covers, when you're going around a corner, keep that distance the same. You want to overlap your passes about 70%, and that's important with these metallic finishes. That helps get an even distribution of those metallics. So basically what that means is I make a pass, I'm going to overlap that previous pass 75%. The first coat of base, I'm putting it on medium wet. I'm not trying to get all the coverage in the first coat. After the first coat, we want to let that flash off for about 10 to 15 minutes. As that flashes off, it's going to cover better on your second and your third coat. Typically 2 to 4 coats is going to be sufficient to cover. This color actually covered really well. It only took about 3 coats. Usually I put an extra coat on just to make sure everything's covered. I'm done applying the first coat. We're going to go ahead and let this flash off, and basically what that means is we're going to allow it to start to cure. We're going to allow those chemicals to start to evaporate out of the paint. Once it gets like a dull finish, we're ready for our second coat, and usually that's about 10 to 15 minutes. You always want to check your technical data sheet for the amount of flash time you allow between coats of paint. The paint we currently use is Nason XL. I purchased this at my local O'Reilly's. They mix it up for me. But there's a lot of different paint brands out there. I'm not saying Nason XL is the best, but I find it very good as far as it's got a decent color match and the coverage is really good on this XL. This paint mixes up 2 to 1, so that's 2 parts of your paint and then 1 part of urethane reducer. This paint doesn't take any activator. There are paints out there that take activator. I really never bought into that. It's just an extra thing to buy, so I try to keep my costs reasonably low, and I've always painted with paint that doesn't use activator, and everything works out fine. Make those decisions yourself, but some paints require some kind of activator for them. What I look for in a paint line is I want good coverage, I want good color matching or reasonable color matching where I can work with it, and I want a reasonable price. There are big differences in paint lines. If you get the cheapest paint line, some of these metallic finishes are going to be blotchy. They don't lay down silky smooth, and you're not going to get as good a color match. Finishing up the second coat here with a medium to wet coat. We're keeping an eye on this bumper cover. We're looking for any particles of dust as we finish up this second coat. Once I finish up this second coat, we're going to let it flash off for another 15 minutes. I want it to be reasonably dry because we're going to evaluate this, look for any particles of dust. Then we're going to sand those out with a little bit of 600 grit sandpaper, and we're just going to denib both of these bumpers. This is going to help you tremendously get a very clean paint job. Now you can see on this bumper cover, the metallics look very nice and even. It's nice and smooth, but there are still some particles of dust in this. So we've got a little 600 grit sandpaper on our pad here. This is just a soft interface pad. We're going to lightly sand those out, and then we're going to have to put another coat of base on this. Because we put scratches in it, we're going to have to apply another coat of base. We want to tack it off, make sure it's clean before we start applying our last coat of base. Make sure that dust is removed. Once we have it clean, we're going to go ahead and do a drop coat. A drop coat is just a technique that's going to allow you to put a nice uniform metallic finish over it. It helps those metallics to lay out nice and uniform. It's also going to cover our sanding scratches from denibbing the dust. The technique for a drop coat is just to move a few extra inches away and dust a coat on. Now you don't want it to be dry. You want to make sure you still get enough paint on because you don't want it to be rough. You don't want it to go on rough. It's just a dust coating to even out those metallics, cover those scratches, and now we're ready for some clear. Here I'm adjusting my gun. I'm opening up my fluid volume all the way, and then I'll pull the trigger, and then I'll turn that fluid volume in till I feel pressure on that trigger, and that means that this gun is set to wide open. I have to turn it upside down because I already have the clear in the gun. Now, as far as the air pressure on this particular gun, this is the Iwata Kiwami 4. Fantastic gun. I purchased this on Amazon for like $180, but they've went up in price significantly since then. I think they're asking like $300 or $400 for these guns, and I think they stopped making them because they were such good guns. They were competing with their higher end guns. I set the air pressure on this gun at around 28 PSI. Of course, we got our fan pattern wide open. Now with clear coat, you typically have a little bit higher air pressure to atomize that clear. Since clear is just a little bit thicker than paint, you need a little bit more air pressure to atomize that clear properly. We're still going to overlap 75 to 80%. So I'll make a pass and then I'll overlap that pass 75 to 80%. Your speed and your distance are going to affect the atomization and how that clear coat lays down, because as the clear comes out of the gun, it atomizes in the air. If you're decreasing the distance between the gun and the panel, you have less atomization before it hits the panel. So you want that perfect distance where you have fine atomization as that clear coat's hitting this bumper cover. Your first coat of clear should be applied medium wet. I'm not looking for absolute perfection on the first coat, although I want it to look good and I want to make sure everything gets covered. We're looking for a good foundation for our second coat of clear. If you're a beginner, move quickly when you're spraying your clear. You don't have to move really slow. Beginners have a tendency to move too slow and watch that clear coat lay on, which is good. But if you're moving too slow, you're going to get excessive buildup of clear coat on the panel. That can cause orange peel or it can cause runs. Move quickly and have a nice pace. That's going to make it much easier for you to get a really good finish. Now we're ready to apply our second coat of clear. We've let this flash off for 10 to 15 minutes. You want it to be tacky, but you don't want it to be stringy. So if you touch like a piece of paper, make sure it's not stringy, make sure it's not wet. If it's tacky, you're pretty much ready for your second coat. But always follow the manufacturer's guideline for flash times. That's just drying times in between coats. Typically, it's 10 to 15 minutes. Now on our second coat of clear, we're going to slow down a little bit, or I may decrease my distance to the panel to put it on a little bit heavier so we can get a really good flow and a nice flat finish. Once you have a good foundation from the first coat, you can put it on a little bit heavier to get that flat finish. I'm really enjoying spraying with this Iwata Kiwami 4. It's a shame that they're not really making it anymore. I think the comparable gun to this is the W300, which is a really good gun, but it's still about $400. If I can find links to this Iwata Kiwami 4, I'll leave them in the description. Also, I'll leave a link to the W300. And all the products I use in this video will be linked down below in the description. But look at the finish that this produces. After our second coat, we've got a nice high gloss, flat finish. It does have some particles of dust, so we'll nib those out, correct those with a little bit of wet sanding and buffing, and this job will be ready to go. So right now I have 2 PDF files that'll walk you through step by step the entire clear coat process and spraying high metallics. So I walk you through step by step. It's a great reference guide if you're looking to paint your own vehicle. You can take a look back at it and look at it step by step. And if you have any questions, you can refer to that PDF file. Very reasonably priced. I do have a couple more planned primer. I'm working on that right now, so be sure to check that out. But you can find those at garagenoisegear.com. And I will leave those links in the description. Listen, I appreciate each and every one of you watching, all the support. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up and definitely subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you on the next episode of Garage Noise.